I never expected that a simple act of kindness, a neighbor carrying my groceries upstairs, would change my life. But that's exactly what happened. It wasn't just the bags of produce and boxes of pasta he carried. It was like he stayed to unpack my heart right there on the kitchen counter, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hide. My name is Lucas. Before all this, my life ran on a schedule so precise you could set a clock by it. I was a graphic designer, which is a convenient way of saying I spent most of my hours in a silent conversation with my computer screen. I worked from home, in a third-floor walk-up apartment that I'd chosen specifically for its large windows and its distance from the general chaos of the world below. My routine was my fortress, a carefully constructed set of habits that kept the quiet hum of loneliness at a manageable volume. Wake up, coffee, work, lunch, work, a simple dinner, maybe a movie, sleep. Repeat. It wasn't a bad life, just a muted one. And in this quiet, muted life, there was Caleb. He lived one floor below me, in 2B. Caleb was the antithesis of my routine. He was vibrant, kinetic energy. I'd see him coming and going from my window, a focal point of life in the otherwise sleepy courtyard of our building. He was always in motion, returning from a run with a healthy sheen of sweat on his brow, carrying a duffel bag slung over a shoulder that looked like it was carved from granite, or laughing with friends on the front steps. He had a way of moving that was utterly self-assured, a physical confidence that I, with my lanky frame and perpetually slightly stooped shoulders, could only ever observe from a distance. He was, in a word, beautiful, not in a delicate, polished way, but in a raw, functional one. Strong hands, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes that seemed to hold a genuine warmth, even when I only saw them from 30 feet up. Of course, I'd cataloged every detail from my safe perch. The way his dark hair curled just a little at the nape of his neck when it got long. The specific rhythm of his footsteps on the stairs, a heavy, reassuring tread that I could distinguish from any other residence. He was the sun-drenched, popular hero of a movie I was only watching, and I was the quiet, unseen narrator. I had, naturally, filed him away under the category of completely and utterly unattainable. It was a thick file, one I was very familiar with. He was confident, athletic, and perpetually surrounded by a rotating cast of equally energetic people. The assumption that he was straight was less a conscious thought and more a fundamental law of the universe, like gravity or the fact that toast always lands butter side down. So, I kept my distance. Our interactions were limited to the briefest of nods in the hallway, a muttered "hey" as we passed on the stairs. Each one left my heart doing a frantic little tap dance against my ribs, a ridiculous reaction to a courtesy that meant nothing. He probably didn't even know my name. Why would he? I was just the quiet guy upstairs. That's how things were for the better part of a year. Me in my curated solitude, him living his bright life just a few feet below me. A comfortable, if lonely, equilibrium. But life has a funny way of taking the stable ground you've built for yourself and shaking it like an earthquake, forcing you out of the fortress whether you're ready or not. My earthquake arrived on a Tuesday, and it was disguised as a puddle of water on the top step of my own internal staircase. I'd just watered my ferns, a task that usually brought me a small measure of peace. I must have been distracted, thinking about a difficult client or a looming deadline. I didn't see the small spill of water I'd left near the landing. My foot, clad in a worn-out sock, found it with perfect, disastrous precision. One moment I was upright, holding an empty watering can. The next, my world was a chaotic blur of motion. My ankle twisted with a sickening pop, my body slammed sideways, and I threw out a hand to break my fall, succeeding only in sending a bolt of white-hot fire up my wrist. I ended up in a heap on the floor, surrounded by the scent of damp earth and the overwhelming symphony of pain. A trip to urgent care confirmed the worst, a badly sprained ankle and a hairline fracture in my wrist. I returned to my apartment hobbling in a massive orthopedic boot and with my right arm, my dominant mouse hand, in a cast and sling. The doctor had been cheerful. Just take it easy for a few weeks. You'll be right as rain. Taking it easy sounded lovely, but the reality was that my fortress had been breached. My simple routines were now Herculean tasks. Making coffee was an ordeal. Opening a jar was impossible. My independence, the very thing I'd structured my life around, had vanished. The real crisis hit 3 days later. My fridge was a barren wasteland, my cupboards echoing with emptiness. I managed, after a frustrating hour of one-handed typing, to place a grocery delivery order. Victory felt hollow when the notification pinged. Your order has been delivered and is waiting in the building lobby. 3 flights of stairs away. Staring down at the 6 canvas bags filled with life's necessities, I felt a wave of utter despair wash over me. It was an insurmountable mountain range of canned soup, milk, and vegetables. I considered my options. I could try to drag one bag up at a time, a process that would likely take hours and probably result in another injury. I could call my one close friend, Sarah, but she lived across town and I hated asking for help. It felt like an admission of failure. So I just stood there at the top of the stairs, leaning heavily on the railing, defeated by my own groceries. That's how life works sometimes, isn't it? You brace for the big disasters, but it's the small, mundane impossibilities that truly break you down. And that was when I heard it. The familiar, solid tread on the stairs. The sound of the front door opening and closing. My heart sank. The last thing I wanted was for anyone, especially him, to see me like this, helpless and pathetic. I tried to shrink into the wall, hoping he'd just walk past my door and head down to his own. But the footsteps stopped. "Hey, you all right there?" The voice was even warmer up close, laced with a genuine concern that caught me completely off guard. I looked up, and there he was. Caleb. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and shorts, his hair slightly damp from a workout. His brow was furrowed as he took in the scene. Me, pale and unsteady, the cast on my arm, the boot on my foot. His gaze flickered to the mountain of grocery bags in the lobby below. He put it all together in an instant. Before I could even stammer out a reply, he offered a small, reassuring smile. "Groceries?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. I just nodded, feeling a hot flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. I was mortified. "Don't move," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I've got it." And with that, he turned and bounded down the stairs. He gathered 3 bags in each hand, the canvas straps straining around his biceps, and started back up. He made it look effortless, like he was carrying bags of cotton instead of what felt like 100 pounds of canned goods to me. He walked right past his own apartment and came all the way up to my door. "Just open up, and I'll bring them in for you," he said, breathing only slightly heavier than usual. I fumbled with my keys, my one good hand shaking, and finally managed to get the door open. He walked into my apartment, my quiet, ordered sanctuary, and set the bags down on the floor of my small kitchen. For a moment, he just stood there, and I thought that would be it. He'd done the nice neighborly thing, and now he would leave, and I would be left alone with my gratitude and my humiliation. But he didn't leave. He looked from the bags on the floor to my face, then back again. "You're not going to be able to put all this away, are you?" he asked. It wasn't pity in his voice, it was practical observation. I shook my head, feeling my throat tighten. "No," I managed to whisper. I hadn't really thought that far ahead." He gave a soft chuckle, a sound that filled the small space with an unexpected warmth. "It's all right. I've got time. How about I help you out?" He didn't wait for an answer. He knelt, pulled a carton of milk from a bag, and looked at me expectantly. Fridge. And just like that, the barrier between my world and his crumbled. He was in my kitchen. He was touching my things. The carefully constructed distance I had maintained for a year had evaporated in the space of 5 minutes, all because of a puddle of water and a few bags of groceries. I pointed dumbly towards the refrigerator, and he opened it, placing the milk inside with a quiet efficiency. "Okay, what's next?" he asked, turning back to the bags with a smile. It was happening. We were talking. He was helping me. And my mind was a frantic mess of gratitude, anxiety, and a wild, burgeoning hope that felt both thrilling and terrifying. He was putting my groceries away, and I had the distinct feeling he was about to find every single one of my secrets tucked between the cereal boxes and the jars of pasta sauce. So began the most surreal hour of my life. Caleb, the guy from my daydreams, methodically unpacking my shopping in my tiny kitchen. I stood awkwardly to the side, leaning against the counter for support, directing him with a series of nods and mumbled instructions. "The cans go in that cupboard there. Yeah, the bread can just go on the counter. Pasta's in the pantry, just to the left." It felt like a bizarre domestic play, and I was a terribly under-rehearsed actor. But Caleb was completely at ease. He moved around my small space with a surprising grace, as if he belonged there. He organized things logically, putting the cold items away first, then the pantry goods, then the produce. There was a thoughtfulness to his actions that I hadn't expected. I'd seen the athlete, the jock. I hadn't anticipated this quiet, competent caregiver. "So, what happened to you?" he asked as he placed a bag of apples in the fruit bowl. His tone was casual, but his eyes were kind. "I, had a disagreement with a puddle of water," I said, trying for a bit of self-deprecating humor to mask my nerves. "The water one." He laughed, a genuine, warm sound that made my stomach flutter. "Ouch. I've been there. Slipped on some ice last winter and was convinced I'd broken my hip. It's amazing how quickly you can go from feeling invincible to feeling like you're 100 years old, right?" That one little comment, that "I've been there," was a bridge. It instantly leveled the playing field. He wasn't some untouchable Greek god. He was a person who also slipped on ice and felt foolish. "Yeah, exactly," I said, a real smile finding its way to my face. "One minute I'm a capable adult, the next I can't even open a jar of pickles." He paused, holding a jar of olives, and looked at me. "Seriously, if you need anything opened, or anything at all, just text me. I'll put my number in your phone." The offer was so simple, so direct. It wasn't a platitude. It was a genuine offer of help. While I clumsily unlocked my phone with my left hand, he continued unpacking. "I'm studying to be a physical therapist," he explained, as if that would somehow make the offer less personal. "So I'm used to people needing a hand. It's kind of my thing." The revelation landed squarely in my chest. A physical therapist. It made so much sense. The way he moved, his easy confidence with the human body, the gentleness that seemed to underpin his strength. He wasn't just a jock, he was a healer in training. My perception of him shifted, deepened. The carefully drawn caricature I'd created in my mind began to smudge, replaced by the much more interesting lines of a real person. As he put the last of the vegetables in the crisper drawer, a small, significant thing happened. He pulled out a bag of coffee beans, my favorite expensive, locally roasted kind. He held it up. "This stuff is the best," he said, his voice full of appreciation. "Their dark roast is incredible." I was stunned. "You know it?" "Yeah, man. I go there all the time. It's my one big splurge," he smiled, a shared secret passing between us over a bag of coffee. It was such a small detail, but it felt monumental. We had something in common, a tiny island of shared experience in the vast ocean of our differences. He wasn't just the guy who ran and lifted weights. He was the guy who appreciated the same ridiculously overpriced coffee that I did. The knowledge was a little spark of warmth inside me. He finished, crushing the canvas bags and stacking them neatly on the counter. The kitchen looked normal again, full and orderly. "There," he said, wiping his hands on his shorts. "All set." "Caleb, thank you," I said, and the words felt completely inadequate. "Seriously, I don't know what I would have done." "Hey, don't mention it. It's what neighbors are for, right?" He leaned against the opposite counter, not making a move to leave. The air in the room had shifted. It was no longer about the groceries. It was just the two of us, standing in a quiet kitchen. "So, you're a graphic designer? I think I saw your name on the mailbox." He knew my name. Lucas. He'd said it so casually. The frantic tap dancing in my chest started up again, this time with a full percussion section. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "I work from home. Stare at screens all day. It's very glamorous." "Sounds peaceful, at least," he replied. "My life is all about anatomy textbooks and frantic clients at the gym where I work part-time. Sometimes I think I'd kill for a little more quiet." There it was again. A little window into his world, revealing a vulnerability, a weariness that his confident exterior completely masked. He wasn't just the life of the party. He was also a student buried in books, a guy who got tired. The attraction I felt for him, which had always been a shallow thing based on looks and distance, was rapidly deepening into something more complex, something dangerously close to real affection. He finally pushed off the counter. "Well, I should let you rest. Remember what I said. Text me if you need anything. Anything at all. I mean it." As he passed me to get to the door, his arm brushed against mine. It was nothing, a completely accidental contact, but a jolt of electricity shot through me. It was the first time we'd ever touched. My skin tingled where he'd made contact, a warm, buzzing spot that I was hyper-aware of. I looked at him, wondering if he'd felt it too, but his expression was unreadable. He paused at the door, turning back one last time. "Take care of yourself, Lucas." And then he was gone, the solid tread of his footsteps descending the stairs, leaving me alone in my now fully stocked kitchen. I stood there for a long time, my heart pounding, replaying every word, every gesture. The quiet of my apartment felt different now. It wasn't just empty. It was filled with the lingering presence of his kindness, the echo of his voice saying my name. A little bit of hope had been unpacked along with the groceries, and it was sitting on my counter, shining and terrifying. The days that followed were a strange mix of pain, frustration, and a quiet, simmering anticipation. My ankle throbbed, my wrist ached, and every simple task was a monumental effort. But threaded through the discomfort was a new awareness of Caleb. I found myself listening for his footsteps, for the sound of his key in the lock downstairs. My apartment no longer felt like an isolated island. It felt like a listening post, tuned to the frequency of his life. He kept his word. The next morning, a text message lit up my phone. "Morning. Need help with the coffee situation?" My heart leaped. It was such a small gesture, but it meant the world. I texted back, "Yes, please. I'm a mess without it." A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on my door. It was Caleb, holding 2 steaming mugs. He'd brought one for himself. He didn't stay long that first time, just long enough to make sure I had everything I needed for the morning. But it became a small ritual. He'd check in via text, and if I needed something, he'd pop up. He opened a stubborn jar of pasta sauce for me one evening. He took my trash out another day. Each interaction was brief, friendly, and charged with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite name. Or maybe I could name it, but I was too afraid to. We talked more during those brief visits. I learned that he was an only child, that he was putting himself through school, and that his laid-back demeanor hid a fierce determination. He learned that I was from a small town, that I'd moved to the city for a job I ended up hating, and that I'd stumbled into freelance design almost by accident. We were filling in the sketches we'd had of each other with color and detail. He wasn't just the hot guy from downstairs anymore. He was Caleb, and I was falling for him, hard. The turning point, the moment when the whole dynamic shifted from friendly help to something undeniably more, came about a week after my fall. I was feeling particularly low. My injuries weren't healing as fast as I'd hoped, and a week of being cooped up and mostly helpless was taking its toll. The simple, human need for cleanliness was getting to me. I felt grimy and gross, and the one thing I wanted more than anything was to wash my hair properly. Trying to do it myself had been a disaster. I couldn't get the shampoo bottle open with one hand, and trying to lather with just my left felt clumsy and useless. I ended up with a wet floor, a damp shirt, and hair that was still frustratingly dirty. I was sitting on my closed toilet lid, head in my good hand, feeling utterly dejected when my phone buzzed. It was Caleb. "Everything okay up there?" Sounded like a waterfall. My frustration boiled over into a moment of reckless honesty. Just trying to do something basic like wash my hair and failing miserably. I texted back, not caring how pathetic it sounded. A minute passed, then another. I figured I'd finally weirded him out, that my oversharing had crossed a line. Then, a knock on the door. I hobbled over and opened it. Caleb was standing there, a clean towel draped over his arm. His expression was serious, gentle. "Come on," he said softly. "Let me help you." My brain short-circuited. "What? No, I can't ask you to do that. That's too much." "It's not," he insisted, his eyes holding mine. "It's part of the gig. Remember? Physical therapy. We help people with activities of daily living all the time. This counts." He was using his future profession as a shield, a way to make the offer clinical and acceptable. But the look in his eyes wasn't clinical at all. It was something else, something deeper. I was too tired and too desperate to argue. I let him in, a silent, nerve-wracked mess. I led him to the bathroom, the most intimate space in my apartment. The air grew thick with unspoken things. This was different from him unpacking groceries or taking out the trash. This was a line, and we were about to cross it. "Okay," he said, his voice a low rumble in the small, tiled room. "Just sit on the edge of the tub. Lean your head back over the faucet." I did as he said, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure he could hear it. I leaned back, closing my eyes, feeling incredibly vulnerable. The position was awkward, my neck craned back, my body tense. Then I felt the water, perfectly warm, as he adjusted the tap. It wasn't a sudden blast, but a gentle stream he directed with a detachable shower head. And then I felt his hands. His fingers, strong and sure, began to work the shampoo into my scalp. All my tension, all my anxiety, seemed to melt away under his touch. He was methodical, careful, his movements professional yet unbelievably tender. The world narrowed to the sound of the running water, the clean scent of the shampoo, and the feeling of his hands in my hair. It was one of the most intensely intimate moments of my entire life. He wasn't just washing my hair. He was caring for me in a way no one had in a very, very long time. His thumbs worked in slow circles at my temples, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. When he rinsed the conditioner out, he was just as thorough. He made sure every bit was gone, his fingers combing through the strands to work out any tangles. When he finally turned off the water, the sudden silence was deafening. I kept my eyes closed for a moment longer, not wanting it to end. "All right," he said, his voice a little rough. "All done." I slowly sat up, my hair dripping onto my shoulders. He was there, holding the towel he'd brought. He gently wrapped it around my head, his fingers brushing against my neck, my cheek. The touch was feather-light, but it sent a shock wave through my system. I opened my eyes and looked at him. He was standing so close, the small bathroom suddenly feeling like it had no air left in it. His gaze was intense, searching. The professional shield was gone. There was no pretense of this being a clinical task anymore. We just stood there for a heartbeat, locked in that gaze. The space between us was charged, electric. I could see the pulse beating in his throat. I could feel his breath on my face. It felt like the moment before a lightning strike, the world holding its breath. I thought, for one wild, impossible second, that he was going to kiss me. I think he thought so too. But the moment broke. He took a small step back, clearing his throat. The spell was shattered. "You should, probably get that dry," he said, his voice strained. He gestured vaguely at my head. "Don't want you to catch a cold." And with that, he turned and quickly left the bathroom. And a moment later, I heard my apartment door click shut. I stood alone in the steam-filled room, my hair clean, my body thrumming with a strange mix of exhilaration and confusion. He had washed my hair. His hands had been so gentle. He had looked at me as if he saw right through me. Something fundamental had shifted between us over my bathtub, and I had no idea what to do about it. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back. The aftermath was awkward. That's the only word for it. The easy, friendly dynamic we had built over the past week was suddenly gone, replaced by a tense, unspoken awareness. The air between us was thick with the memory of that moment in the bathroom. After he left that day, I didn't hear from him for 24 hours. No text, no knock. The silence was louder than any conversation we'd ever had. My mind, of course, went into overdrive. I became a forensic analyst of our last encounter. I replayed the entire hair-washing incident on a continuous loop, dissecting every glance, every touch, every word. Let me take you through the thought process of a world-class overthinker. First, there was the "he was just being nice" theory. This was the safest, most logical explanation. He was studying to be a physical therapist. This was just a practical application of his skills. He realized he'd crossed a boundary of intimacy, felt awkward about it, and was now pulling back to re-establish a professional, neighborly distance. It was all about him, his professionalism, and had nothing to do with me. This theory was sensible. It was also soul-crushing. Then there was the "he was into it, but then he freaked out" theory. This one was far more appealing, and therefore, far more dangerous. In this version, he felt the same electric charge I did. The look in his eyes wasn't a figment of my hopeful imagination. He wanted to kiss me, but then his own fear or confusion kicked in. Maybe he wasn't out. Maybe he was questioning things for the first time. Maybe the intensity of the moment scared him off. This theory filled me with a terrifying, fluttering hope. It also made me feel intensely protective of him, wanting to give him the space he clearly needed. Finally, there was the "I am a complete and utter idiot" theory. In this scenario, I had imagined everything. The charged atmosphere, the intense gaze, all of it. He was just being a kind human being, and my lonely, longing brain had projected a whole romantic narrative onto a simple act of help. He hadn't felt a thing, But he'd sensed my reaction, my crush. He saw that I'd read way too much into it. And now he was horrified and embarrassed for me, and was avoiding me so he wouldn't have to deal with my pathetic, unrequited feelings. This was my brain's favorite theory, the one it returned to again and again, because it was the one that hurt the most and therefore felt the most plausible. The next time I saw him was in the hallway, 2 days later. It was excruciating. I was hobbling toward the stairs to check my mail, and he was coming up. We both saw each other at the same time, and there was this split second of panic in both our eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice a little too loud, a little too cheerful. "Hey," I squeaked back, my voice a full octave higher than normal. He didn't stop to chat. He didn't ask how I was doing. He just gave me a tight, forced smile and practically scurried past me down to his apartment. The interaction lasted less than 5 seconds, but it was enough to send me into another spiral of analysis. The forced cheerfulness, the lack of eye contact, the hasty retreat, it all pointed directly to the "I am an idiot" theory. My heart sank into the orthopedic boot on my foot. I had ruined it. I had ruined the one good, kind connection I'd made in years by wanting it to be something more. I spent the rest of that day in a state of quiet mourning for a relationship that had never even existed. I resolved to pull back completely. I wouldn't text him. I would be polite but distant if we passed in the hall. I would go back to being the quiet guy upstairs, and he could go back to being the hot guy downstairs, and the strange, beautiful, terrifying intimacy we had shared would be packed away like a secret. It was the only way to protect what was left of my pride. I was sitting on my couch that evening, trying to lose myself in a movie but really just staring at the blank screen of my own thoughts, when I heard it. A knock on my door. It wasn't loud or demanding, just a soft, hesitant rap. My stomach twisted itself into a knot. I knew it was him. A part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home, to just sit in silence until he went away. But another, braver part of me knew I couldn't. We couldn't leave things like this, suspended in this awful, awkward silence. I took a deep breath, pushed myself off the couch, and hobbled to the door. I pulled it open. Caleb stood there, looking just as nervous as I felt. He wasn't smiling. He was just looking at me, his expression earnest and incredibly anxious. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice low. I just nodded and stepped aside, my heart doing a slow, heavy drumbeat in my chest. This was it. The conversation. I was about to either have my heart broken or my world turned completely upside down. He walked into the living room, but didn't sit down. He just stood in the middle of the rug, rubbing the back of his neck, a gesture I was starting to recognize as his tell for when he was stressed. I closed the door and leaned against it, waiting. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. Finally, he spoke, his eyes fixed on a spot on my floor. "Lucas, I have to be honest with you." My blood ran cold. Here it comes, I thought. The gentle letdown. I'm flattered, but... He took a deep breath and finally met my eyes. The vulnerability there was staggering. "Things have been weird between us the last couple of days," he said. "And it's my fault. I'm sorry. It's okay," I said automatically, even though it wasn't. "No, it's not," he insisted, shaking his head. "And I need to tell you why. Because I haven't been entirely truthful with you." My mind raced. What had he lied about? Was he not really a student? Did he have a secret family? He took another breath, as if steeling himself. "When I helped you with your groceries," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't an accident. I didn't just happen to be coming home right then." I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, finally looking directly at me, his gaze unwavering. "I saw the delivery guy drop them off. I was watching from my window. I saw you come out and look down the stairs. And I waited. I waited for the right moment to come out and discover you. Because I've been wanting to talk to you for months." The world tilted on its axis. Every theory I had so carefully constructed shattered into a million pieces. This was a variable I had never, ever considered. "For months," I whispered, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. He nodded, a flush creeping up his neck. "Yeah, for months. I'd see you coming and going. I saw you at the coffee shop once. You were drawing in a sketchbook and you had this look of total concentration on your face. And, I don't know, I was just drawn to you. But you always seemed so self-contained, so in your own world. I'm not as confident as I look, Lucas. I had no idea how to approach you. I rehearsed saying hi in the hallway about 100 times, and it still came out sounding stupid. He let out a dry, humorless laugh. So when I saw you needed help, I saw my chance. It was a perfect excuse to finally talk to you. And getting to know you this past week, it's been even better than I imagined. You're funny and kind, and you have this quiet strength I really admire. He paused, and his expression grew serious again. And then, in the bathroom, I felt it. I know you felt it too. And it scared the hell out of me. Not because of you, but because it was all happening so fast, and it felt so real. I panicked. I pulled away, and I've been kicking myself ever since. I've been so worried that I hurt you, or made you think I was just messing with you. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at him, my mind reeling, my heart swelling with a feeling so immense it felt like it would burst from my chest. All my anxiety, all my fear, it was all based on a false premise. I hadn't been imagining it. He felt it too. Caleb, I finally managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. I thought I had imagined everything. I thought you were just being nice and that I was being pathetic. A look of profound relief washed over his face. No, he said, taking a step closer. God, no. Anything but. He was standing right in front of me now, so close I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Lucas, I'm falling for you. I think I have been for a while. And that was it. The last of my defenses crumbled. I'm falling for you, too. I confessed, the words tasting of relief and pure, unadulterated joy. A slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, a real one this time, reaching all the way to his eyes. He raised a hand, his fingers gently tracing my jawline, right where the sling for my broken wrist cut across my chest. His touch was hesitant, questioning. I leaned into it, closing my eyes, giving him the answer he was looking for. And then he kissed me. It wasn't like the kiss I had imagined in the bathroom, the one that was tentative and questioning. This was sure. It was confident and gentle and full of all the unspoken things we had been holding back for a week. It was a kiss that said, finally. It was the end of the awkwardness and the fear, and the beginning of everything else. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathless. He rested his forehead against mine. So, he murmured, his voice soft. Just to be clear, we're on the same page. I laughed, a real, happy laugh that felt like it came from the deepest part of my soul. Yeah, I said, my good hand finding his. I think we're on the same page. The weeks that followed were like waking up from a long, gray dream into a world of color. My ankle and wrist began to heal, the casts and boots eventually coming off, but the real healing was happening on the inside. The quiet loneliness that had been my constant companion for so long began to recede, replaced by the warm, steady presence of Caleb. We took things slow, but with a sense of certainty that was new to both of us. Our first official date was a trip back to the coffee shop, the one where he'd first seen me. We sat for hours, my sketchbook open on the table between us, but this time I wasn't drawing. I was just talking, listening, learning all the little details that made him who he was. He told me about his dream of opening a physical therapy clinic that incorporated holistic wellness, a place that felt more like a sanctuary than a medical office. I told him about my secret ambition to illustrate a children's book. We shared our dreams as easily as we shared a pastry. He was a constant source of surprise. The guy I once thought of as just a jock had a deeply artistic soul. He loved old black and white movies. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of plants and kept a small, thriving jungle on his balcony. He had a playlist for everything, for studying, for cooking, for lazy Sunday mornings. And he folded my laundry one day, just because, and I almost cried because it was such a simple, profound act of love. My apartment, my former fortress of solitude, became our shared space. The sound of his laughter filled the rooms that had once been silent. His running shoes ended up by my door. My favorite mug became his favorite mug. We cooked together in my kitchen, the same space where our story had begun. We moved around each other with an easy, practiced grace, a comfortable dance of domestic intimacy. A few months after that first, life-changing kiss, we were standing in that very kitchen. I was chopping vegetables for dinner, my wrist now completely healed and strong. Caleb came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. He watched my hands work for a moment. "Remember when you couldn't do that?" he murmured into my ear. I smiled, leaning back into his embrace. "I remember. I also remember a certain someone who had to come and rescue me from a very intimidating jar of olives. He chuckled, his chest vibrating against my back. Best decision I ever made, he placed a soft kiss on my neck, pretending to be a hero just to talk to the cute guy upstairs. I turned in his arms to face him, my heart full. I'm glad you did, I said. You carried my groceries, and you just stayed. I'm not going anywhere, he said, his expression soft and serious. And I knew he meant it. It's funny, isn't it? How we build walls around ourselves, thinking we're creating safety, when all we're really doing is locking ourselves in. We think we need grand gestures, dramatic events, to change our lives. But sometimes, it's the smallest things. A puddle of water, a helping hand, a shared love for a certain kind of coffee. I never expected that an injury would lead to my greatest healing, or that a simple request for help would lead me to love. But letting someone see you when you're at your most vulnerable, when you can't even open your own jars or wash your own hair, that's a special kind of intimacy. It's letting someone unpack the messy, complicated contents of your life and trusting that they'll handle everything with care. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, they'll put it all back together in an order that makes more sense than it ever did before.